Thank you for tuning in and welcome back, team. In today's episode of Home Selling Tips, you'll learn how much it costs to sell a house. My name is Andrew Finney, your real estate geek. If you need help finding a top agent where you live, or if you simply want to drop me a line and say hello, my contact info is below. If you haven't already done so, please go ahead and subscribe to this channel now and like this video. For reference, I upload 6 days a week, so please make sure to tap that bell icon and you'll get notified of the very next video. Thank you. Okay, team, so let's talk about this. If you're out there right now, whether you're in a seller's market, a buyer's market, or a normalized market, you're always going to want to know how much is it going to cost to sell your house, and where is that money exactly going? Are you getting the best representation for how much it's really going to cost you? So in today's episode, we're going to list out 6 closing costs for a seller, and so that you know how much it's going to cost you to sell a house, along with giving you just kind of a general frame of reference for an illustrative purpose of how much it's going to cost you in total whenever you're planning for simple math. Okay, I want to sell my house. What's this going to cost me, right? So let's go ahead and get into it and answer those questions. So the first seller closing cost comes as no surprise. It's your actual realtor commission. Now, interestingly enough, with realtor commission, a lot of sellers aren't always aware, especially if you're a first-time home seller, aren't aware of where does that 6, 7, 8% or whatever the negotiated rate of commission is that you're working with the listing agent. Where does all that money go? Does it go all to the listing agent, or what happens to it, right? So traditionally what happens is, if you, let's use a nice easy number here. And again, a fictitious example of 6% listing commission. So if you listed your home with a real estate agent for 6%, generally what's going to happen is 3% is going to go to the listing side and 3% is going to go to the buyer broker side. So then that commission actually gets split in half. From there, it's also going to be split with the respective agents' brokerages. They got to pay taxes, they got to pay business expenses and everything else out of that commission, right? But that's where it goes. So for you as a seller, you just want to be able to plan on that. Okay, we're taking care of the listing agent and we're taking care of the buyer agent. That's how this works, okay? So it's important to note that whenever you're determining, because sometimes people get a little bit interesting about this. You know, obviously you want to make sure that if you're going to be putting money up towards a real estate agent, you're getting the best representation possible, you're getting aggressive marketing, and you have an agent that knows what they're doing. Yet at the same time, where most people would realize, hey, you kind of pay for what you get, then you also get the people out there that are like, oh, well, I want to save money, so I'm going to try to get the lowest commission possible, and then they end up getting lousy services as a result, and they may not sell their home, or if they do sell their home, even in the strongest seller's market, they might be taking a loss for what they could have sold for by just hiring a full service representative, a full service brokerage that was going to give top-notch service. There's a lot of different things that go into that. So let's go ahead and if you have questions about that for reference, just go ahead and reach out to me. I'm happy to listen to you, and I'm happy to assist you with that as well. So let's go into the second one. The second thing is actually home repairs. So with home repairs, it's important to note that generally when you get ready to put your home on the market, there might be those seasonal home maintenance things that haven't yet been done, or you might have those projects that are left unattended in the house, and you know the ones I'm talking about, those ones that you started and then you just didn't get around to it, or you didn't get around to finishing it, or those ones that you see day by day and you're like, oh, it's so minor, I'm just gonna, I'll get to it. Well, before you go on the market, what you're gonna wanna do is complete all of those projects for your home repairs. I'm not saying that you're gonna go out and do a full massive renovation, because it may not make sense to do it. In some cases, a renovation might actually boost your sales price, but you need to talk to your trusted real estate advisor about what upgrades are boosting what in what market, right? And which ones are getting the most money, because depending on where you're at, it may not make sense. Depending where you're at, it might make sense. That's where you got to talk to your trusted real estate advisor to see whether that's going to be a good idea or not, and make sure that you're going to get your money back. It's a very common thing that comes up. Andrew, you know, should we do some upgrades before we sell the house? Well, let's take a look at it, and let's take a look at the numbers and see what homes are selling for with the upgrades in your area, and which ones are what they're selling for without the upgrades in your area. And then let's factor out how much it's going to cost and what your possible return is on that. Once you have that conversation, then you'll know the answer to the question whether you should be doing that. But specifically underneath home repairs, I'm talking about the home maintenance things, you know, leaky faucets, and you know, if you got something on the roof that needs to be fixed, if you got a leak in the roof, if you got a faulty water heater, faulty AC, stuff like that, general home repairs that should be done. Now, I'm a strong proponent, and I've said it in several other of the home selling tips episodes, about having a home pre-inspection performed. Again, home pre-inspection. So what's that mean? A home pre-inspection means you're actually going to contact a home inspector, licensed, certified, bonded home inspector, that's going to review your house on a 1,600-point home inspection checklist. They're going to provide their findings to you. That's the best place to start, because that's the same thing that the buyers would see. Now, doing that before you go on the market is extremely, extremely wise. And here's the reason why. Because if you know what's wrong with the house before you go on the market, you have the opportunity clarity and the time to go ahead and address those in turn and know what's going to happen in there, and discuss it with your trusted real estate advisor to know which one of those things should be fixed. Ideally, you fix the whole list, but sometimes it might not be physically able to do that, and that's okay. Just talk to your trusted real estate advisor about which ones are going to have the biggest impact and the ones that you definitely need to get done, especially if you're considering accepting FHA financing or VA financing or USDA financing, which are federally insured loans. They work a little bit differently. You're going to have to make sure that you're meeting what's called health and safety and those lending guidelines. So you need to make sure that you're making those repairs. A good example is if you don't have fire alarms throughout the house, or maybe in your area it's required for you to have carbon monoxide alarms in the house, and if you don't have those, then you're going to need to get them, because they might be something that they need. Again, even here in Las Vegas, Nevada, I mean, yeah, we're really earthquake prone, right? But yet when you walk into a house, if you want the VA or the FHA to lend on those homes, those water heaters have to have earthquake straps around them. So that would be something that if it didn't have it, it could actually stall the process going forward. Now, by virtue of having this done up front, you'll have a clear understanding of what's going forward. Now, I know some of you sellers out there might be saying, oh, you know what, Andrew, that's a buyer cost, let them deal with it, and we'll deal with it when we get into escrow, into the closing process. But here's the thing. If you do that, then you risk something maybe being more wrong with the house than you thought, because sometimes big things do pop up in home inspections that no one anticipated, and now they have to be addressed, or the price has to come down, or all this money for repairs has to be done, and it has to be done in very short order now. Whereas taking your time and doing it up front, you'll have a clear vision of what needs to happen with your property to be able to get it sold. So it's extremely, extremely, extremely wise to perform that home pre-inspection so that you can come up with essentially like a home maintenance list. Okay, I need to do this, 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 and this, and this. Talk to your trusted real estate advisor. Okay, it's going to take me about 5 days, 10 days, or whatever to get this work done. Go ahead and knock it out before you go on the market, and then make that home inspection report available to the prospective buyers of your house and show them the receipts for the repairs that were done. Always hire licensed, bonded, and insured professionals to perform the work that needs where it's needed for them. Now, obviously changing out like a smoke detector or carbon monoxide detector, that's not going to require the use of an electrician. So you can do that kind of stuff yourself, right? But if you got to change out like plumbing, electrical, anything like that, then go ahead and hire the appropriate tradesman to go ahead and do that and make that receipt available showing that it was done. That's really going to bode well for you as a seller when you can furnish that kind of information to a prospective buyer. They're going to be thinking, you know what, they're on the up and up, they're not trying to hide anything from us, and we're good to go. So that brings you into a sub point of home repairs that's actually the inspection repairs, everything that we've been talking about. If for some reason you choose not to do the home pre-inspection and you get hit with all these repair requests, right, it is all negotiable. Yes, it is. At the same time, if you want to accept different financing type, you may be required to fix certain things that you may not have wanted to fix, and saying, oh, I'm just going to sell my house as is. Well, let me share a little interesting real world thing with you, what happens in practice when someone says as is as a seller, especially if one is not completely familiar, whether it's the agent that's not completely familiar or the seller that's not completely familiar with it as is sell. Whenever I represent buyers, because I work with both sellers and buyers, right? So when I represent buyers and they see that on the multiple listing service when we're getting ready to go show homes, and they say as is, most buyers will be like, well, what does that mean? The seller's not planning on making any repairs? So that's exactly what that means. And they're like, no, I don't want to see the house. There's something wrong with the house. I mean, otherwise, why would they sell it as is? Why would they do that? These are common questions that come up. And it's a very valid concern and very reasonable question for a buyer to ask. So if you want to make sure that you're doing everything correctly and you get that home inspection in, it is negotiable from the buyer to you, but be open-minded towards making these repairs. Now, if you don't have the time to make all the repairs, then as long as repairs are done or the things are done in the house pursuant to the lending guidelines are done, then what you might want to consider doing is chatting it over with your trusted real estate advisor, possibly providing a credit towards the buyer closing costs or something for the amount of money that would cost to fix those items in the inspection report. Something to consider and something to think about. That brings us into the third point, which is staging and marketing. Now, staging and marketing is crucially important. Now, normally, like if you're in Las Vegas right now and we set a time to meet, we'd go into your house, we'd have a conversation of what we're going to do to be able to sell your house, how much your home is worth in the current market on an estimated fair market value basis, make adjustments as needed based upon what is actually going on with your house. Either the price might be a little bit higher, the price might be a little bit lower, or the price might be the same depending on the condition of your house, right? So the next step after after we sign the listing agreement and disclosures is actually to go through the house room by room with a notepad and start looking at what needs to be decluttered, depersonalized, otherwise prepared for the market, which brings into the staging point where you want to make sure the home is staged. Now you have a couple of different options here. You can either do traditional home staging, which is going to cost a lot of money, and at certain price points of homes across the nation, it's definitely going to make sense to do it. Go ahead and do it. At the same time, there's also lesser expensive options like padstyler.com. I'll put the link down below. They're really cool people, and what they can actually do is take pictures, professional pictures of your house that would be provided to them by your listing agent, and then they can go ahead and virtually stage your house. Now, it may not be true to form whenever a buyer walks in, the staging may not be there, but for the purposes of marketing, it's genius, because buyers will be able to better visualize what different furniture looks like in the space that your home provides. Something to think about there. It doesn't cost that much money to do it on padstyler.com. Again, the link is down below. Full disclosure, if you use their services, I'll get a small commission on that. That'll help me continue making even better videos for you. So thank you for your support, by the way. So the fourth one is actually going into utilities. Now, obviously, whenever you get ready to sell a house, you're going into the closing process. You have your utilities, you have your you have your electricity, your gas, your water, your sewer, your garbage services and everything, right? All of that stuff is going to be prorated out. So you're going to be like, okay, you're closing in the middle of the month, then you're going to take a 30-day cycle, and all of that stuff is going to be prorated. Now, who's going to make that proration amount? Who's going to come up with that amount? It's actually going to be the title and escrow company that do that by contacting them and prorating out the estimated expenses. Just be prepared for it that you're still going to have, you're still going to need to pay your utilities up until the point that you get your home sold and closed. So then you'll get money back if that's the case, if you overpaid, okay? The fifth thing is actually mortgage payoff. So with the mortgage payoff, it's sometimes really interesting when I meet with families. They're like, okay, Andrew, we got a $500,000 house. That's what we can sell it for, right? And we've all agreed that, yes, that's the right price for the market. And they say, okay, well, we owe like $220 on it. How much is my payoff amount going to be? The best source of information for that is actually going to be turning into your mortgage service provider, whether they provide you with an online portal with estimated payoff amounts, requesting an estimated payoff amount, and it is something that the title company is going to do anyways when you begin the closing process by asking you for your information for your mortgage provider, and it's so that they can go ahead and request the actual payoff amount and pay it off. Now, the reason I said this is interesting is that generally your payoff amount is slightly higher than whatever your balance is. So if you owe like $220 on your $500,000 house, your payoff amount might be like $220 or $221 or $221 and a half, right? So you're like, well, where did that extra $1,000 to $1,500 come from, Andrew? Well, that's a great point. So normally what happens is, depending on the loan type that you have, when you get ready to pay it off, there'll be like a bulk interest payment that's done right there at the end to pay it off. So you got to be ready for that, and you got to know about that. So as we're factoring what's called an estimated net sheet for you to know how much you're going to possibly walk away with from the sale of your home, then you have an idea of how much that's going to be. The best way to actually know is to actually order a mortgage payoff, but just to play it safe, generally estimate maybe an additional 0.5% of the balance owed of the house, and you'll probably be safe with that number. Just something to keep in the back pocket of your brain right there whenever you're thinking of how much it costs to sell a house. Now, the sixth one gets into an interesting tidbit here. Closing cost and additional fees and negotiations of buyer closing cost as well. So the total lump sum of how much it costs to sell a house, right? When people say to me, Andrew, you know, I'm not ready to sell yet, but I'm kind of just wanting to guesstimate how much it's going to cost, I always tell them, hey, a great safe rule of thumb is a factor somewhere between 8 and 10% of your estimated value of your home. So again, if you're talking about a $500,000 house and you're factoring 8 to 10% on a Again, I got to tell you fictitiously, I'd love to be able to tell you definitively, but we have this little thing in real estate called the Sherman Antitrust Act, and I can't actually tell you what the commission amount's going to be because it would be in violation of fair trade policy underneath the Sherman Antitrust Act. So please bear with me. We're going to use a fictitious example of 8 to 10% on that $500,000 house, which would mean that your total closing cost would be somewhere between $40,000 to $50,000 to sell that house. Now that includes your Realtor Commission, that includes the home repair, estimated home repairs on the property. That would probably include your staging and marketing. That include the payoffs for your utilities, your mortgage payoff, and also the additional fees that are going to be ascribed to you you, the seller, from the title company with your owner's title insurance policy, to any real property transfer taxes that have to happen in your area, to any other taxes from the state, local, and county levels when it comes to selling a property and how that works in your location. To know exactly how that works, you might want to contact a trusted real estate advisor in your area to break that down for you. Now, going back to one of the reasons I said this is an interesting sub point here is when we start considering buyer closing cost. And I'm always a proponent, and if you watch home buying tips videos, you'll hear me say it a lot. Buyer closing costs are what? Buyer closing cost. So, you know, it's one of those things that depending on what market you're in, if you're in a seller's market, it's probably highly likely you won't even be asked for any buyer closing costs because you're going to get other offers and probably several other offers not asking for anything like that. If you're in a balanced market, you might be asked for some or all, or maybe none of them, right? Now, if you're in a buyer's market, more than likely you're going to be asked the buyer closing cost. Now, buyer closing costs generally range between 2% and 4% of a sales price. So going back to our $500,000 home example, that means that a buyer closing cost could add an additional $10,000 to $20,000 on top of all the rest of the costs and fees that we've already talked about in today's episode onto your balance. So if you're following along with the numbers, when we're talking about the 8 to 10% range to sell a property, whenever we start talking about the 10% spot, I want you to consider that I've already rolled in a possible buyer closing cost to reach that number, because that's a pretty high number. A 10% is very high, to be honest with you. So I've already factored in worst case scenario from like kind of best case scenario to worst case scenario in that $40,000 to $50,000. Just consider that whenever you say, oh, how much is it going to cost? Well, on a fictitious basis again, right? 8 to 10%. It could be as possible as low. It could be as low as 7%, and still getting a full service representation. It just depends on the agent that you're working with and the brokerage you're working with. At the same time, I'm just going to say 8 to 10, and just so you know, I tend to estimate high, and the reason being is if I estimate high and you're happy with those numbers, then when you get more money back, you're normally a good thing when we're working together, right, for you to be quite pleased with getting more money back. So plan for reality and then what happens, right? So if you have some questions about this, I'm going to go ahead and pop up my contact information. Feel free to reach out to me. Need help finding a top agent where you live, or if you simply want to drop me a line to say hello, contact info is on the screen and down below. Now it's your turn. Tell me what was most significant to you. What did you learn the most from in today's episode about learning how much it costs to sell a home? Was it what was most helpful to you? Was it like the last thing of an actual percentage basis to estimate on a fictitious level? I got to keep saying that, sorry, but fictitious level of the 8 to 10% to sell a home. Tell me what you took away from this video in the comment section below, along with any of your experiences of what it costs to sell a house and situations that you've experienced that help our community continue to learn and grow together. Now, if you haven't already done so, I'm going to ask you to do 3 things. Number 1, please subscribe to this channel. Number 2, please like this video. Number 3, please share this video around with someone you know is going to be help. Thank you so much for watching today, team. In between now and next time, I'm wishing you and yours a lifetime full of love, wealth, abundance, and happiness. Enjoy a wonderful day.